Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Journey Back to You podcast. This is another segment of the book chat where I talk about books that I've read, talk about books that I'm reading, all things reading. And so I am so excited to be back in your ears, or if you are not listening to me, but you're watching me on YouTube, hello. I'm so excited that you are back to hear the next book that I have read. Today's book is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. This is what the title of the cover of the books look like. And if you are listening to the podcast, my podcast, The Journey Back to You, you want this book in your collection. A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself is the subtitle of this book. So, if you're listening to The Journey Back to You and you're getting back to you, you want a guide to reclaiming yourself. And if I'm quite honest, I kind of like, I would have, it would have been amazing for me to start with this book because hands down, I believe every single person needs this book, especially a woman who is on a journey back to herself. Like this book is amazing. I couldn't I'm going to get into it. That is the book. So before I get into the book, let me tell you what's been going on. So I went to go visit my family and came back with some sickness, right? And it took me out. It took me out for about 2 weeks. I was not well. If you cannot hear me well, it is because I'm a little nasally, so I don't sound like my usual self. But this is the best that I have sound. This is probably the best I have sounded closer to my natural voice. And so I was like, I have to get back on the podcast. It is the listeners want to hear the books I've been reading. I was consistent with giving y'all the books right on time, but life happened and I needed to first take care of me and then my family and then also get to a space where I could mentally, because I had a lot of brain fog, so mentally be able to even deliver the stuff. And I know that it's safe for me to just show up, but the way I was listening to myself, I had tried to record. I actually recorded a podcast and I was like, I can do the podcast, but I wanted to feel really good about what I put out. And then also too, I was like, oh my goodness, it is summertime. So more people are reading, more people are relaxing, more people are having fun. And so I was like, I'm going to do something fun. And so what I want to ask of you at the top, I'll probably mention it at the end if I remember. I want you to go to my website. My website is sierracasher.com. So literally just that. And you're going to click on contact me or connect with me, I think it is. And when you connect with me, I want you to tell me about a book that you have read or tell me about a book that you are currently reading. Give me some book suggestions because I am all about the reading this summer. Not just this summer, but I'm really wanting to see what other people are reading. But if you were like, hey, I want to read this book with you, or um, I want to connect with you and let's talk about, have you read this book? So you can suggest to me books and you can also ask me, have I read these books? I'm super excited. That's going to be so fun. I cannot wait to hear from you all. I cannot wait to connect with you and talk about the book that you're reading because we all don't like the same types of books. Some people like fiction. Some people like nonfiction. Some people like fantasy. Some people like romance. Some people like thrillers. There's so many different genres that I'm like, okay, this is gonna get the ball rolling for us to connect and see what most of the community listens to or watches, not watches, listens to or reads. And that's a whole nother thing. This is not an ad, but I want to say this. If you don't have Audible, listen, you're missing out. You are missing out on an entire experience, especially when the author of your book that you're reading also reads the book. They also narrate the book and you're reading along. It is an entire experience. My last book that I read, that's not what we're talking about today, but the last book that I read, the author was also the narrator of her book. I had like I had the most amazing time reading that book. And it brought my heart so much like joy and like delight to read this book because the author was narrating her book. And so I was like, well, how many more people are narrating their books? Like, so if you know of a book that somebody is narrating, tell me about it. Like the author is narrating their book, they're on Audible, and they have a book, like a print book out. I want to know. So that is the fun thing for the summertime because it's summertime. And I just want to know, and I want put me in the know because I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. Okay. So let's jump right into this book for today. Today's book, because I did say all of that, is Nedra Tawwab's book. It is titled Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And this is what it looks like. An amazing, amazing book for those of you who are reclaiming yourself. All right. So let's jump in. So the first thing I want to say is that I had some resistance to sharing this book. Um, Specifically because boundaries have been one of, like, as I've been on my journey back to myself, if I'm completely honest with you, boundaries have been so difficult for me. And it'll make sense as I share the things that came up. Not necessarily, I'm not going to share things that came up, maybe I will. But as I share things that I highlighted to share with you for women who may have endured some stuff in your life, which we all have on some level, whew, I did not think I was going to get emotional about this. But I want to say, like, I believe every single human being on the planet who has who has difficulty in relationships or and not just that, even if you have the best relationships, I want to say and stretch on a limb and say you probably had amazing boundaries. But for those of us who were navigating life's things and you weren't taught boundaries, or you're just like, I don't really know what you even mean when you say boundaries, then you want to stay listening to what I'm going to share, because I'm not going to give you, like, you're going to have to get the book so that you can have this as a tool for you and read it. It is amazing. And it's so easy to read. I'll tell you one of the reviews of this book. Okay, so Alexandra L., the author of After the Rain, she says this is the boundary Bible. Nedra teaches us not only how to set healthy boundaries, but to be clear about our feelings and intentions. Finding peace requires showing up. Nedra has written the blueprint on how to not show up, but also, oh, excuse me. Nedra has written the blueprint on how to not only show up, but also do the work. So I hope that those words are something that will pull you in to be like, I absolutely need this book. And it is available on Audible as well. So you want to go over, matter of fact, let's see if I can show you that, because this is not the part that I plan to do here, but I want to show you so that you all can go grab this book. And she's also narrating her book as well. And I listened to hers. But because this book was such a it's a little difficult for me to read, but this is what it looks like. If you go to Audible, you will put in Set Boundaries, Find Peace. It will pull it up, and it will look like, let's see if we can get the camera to focus. Let me see. It will look like this. So it says it. All right. And so you want to go, you want this. Either you find it on here, and I will say this. If you are a person who needs this book in your life and you're like, I don't have the financial ability to get this book, I want you to send me a message. I want you to send me a message, and I will gift 5 books to people who send me a message and say, I need this book in my life. I will gift you the book. I will either, you're like, hey, I want, and I will do either way. I will send it to you on Audible, because you can give books on Audible, or I will send you the physical book, whichever one is more comfortable for you. That is how much I believe in this book. Not just the book, but in her work. That is how much I believe in these words. That is how transformative this book has been for me. Now, I've read other books and I haven't shared them here for particular reasons. But this book, I read a book about boundaries before I read this one, but nothing was as clear and as clear and as nothing was just as, I'll just say it that way. Nothing was as clear and as inviting as this book has been. It doesn't, and for me, I'm going to share what some of the things that are in this book, but I want to give this background because I feel like it's so important for people to understand that the life that we truly desire, we can have it. The life that, even if you walk through some traumatic things in your life, even if you are going through some things in your life right now, like, you can have a different life based on the boundaries that you have. And is not something, this is one of the things that I realized about when I was reading this book. I had spent so many years frustrated, angry, resentful, and just so like done with relationships and people and interactions and communication. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And it was before I read this book, but even in reading this book, some of the things I had implemented, it's been a decade. Me and a friend were talking, and I didn't even realize this, but it's been a decade since I first went to therapy. I put myself in therapy when I was in college, and I did not realize that a decade later, I would be reading something that would help me to see and iron out some of the hardest things in my life. Like, like I said, I went to therapy a decade ago, literally. And I just did not recognize back, first of all, back then I was not mature. I told my therapist that he did not understand me. He was a different race and he was a male, and I did not have a choice in the therapist that I chose because my insurance didn't cover that at the time. And so I didn't have a choice in who he was or who she was. They literally got me to fill out a questionnaire. And at the college that I was at the time, it was free. And I just knew I needed some help. But I did not know that boundaries were the thing that were going to change my life. I did not know that therapy was going to be a thing that changed my life. I did not know that it was okay for me to set boundaries. I didn't know that that actually is the way that you keep relationships flourishing, is to have boundaries. I didn't know that boundaries were self-care, like a way to take care of myself. And so I share that with you at the top because I am so passionate about this, because the subtitle of this book is A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself. And those of you who listen to me, those of you who are watching me, I want you to get to a space to be more fulfilled. I want you to get to a space to be more at home with yourself. And it is very important to me that I not only just talk about this stuff. I don't just get on the podcast and just talk about stuff and share my life and share the things I'm going through just because I want to hear myself talk. I do not I get on my podcast specifically. My intention with my podcast is to spread amazing messages about how it is safe for us to go home to ourselves. It is imperative. And my intention with the podcast is to spread this message that the journey back to you is completely and totally fine, right? It's completely and totally the thing that will change the world, I believe, because when we can be at home with ourselves, it will feel like home for other people as well. When they interact with us, we will be able to teach them and show them and live a life before them that shows them that, beautiful, come back home to you. Beautiful, you're outside of you. It's so imperative that we learn boundaries. And then I will add this layer, and then I'm going to talk about the book, especially as women of color, women, Black women specifically. I will say it is so important for us to, like, because we didn't always, like, she talks about it in her book, like, some of our parents made, mother, father, guardian, whatever that you had growing up, they had great intentions to protect us. And some of them taught us to not have boundaries. Some of them taught us that secrecy would actually protect us. And don't get it wrong or twist it, but back in the day, during those times when they may have grown up, secrecy actually was something that protected them. Keeping the things that happened in their household inside of their household would actually protect the family from what was happening in the outside. But nowadays, and I say nowadays, as we have progressed, that is no longer true. And some people are still in that old time thing. The world has modernized, the world has advanced. There's so much information out here now. And I believe that if you get this book, because I don't want to keep going on my tangent, if you get this book and you don't have access to finances right now, or you're like, hey, it's not in my budget, like I said, contact me on my website. I will give 5 people a book or an audible. Okay, so let me jump in. So Nedra's definition of boundaries is this. She says that boundaries are expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. Expectations in relationships help you stay mentally and emotionally well. Learn when to say no and when to say yes. Is learning when to say no and when to say yes is also an essential part of feeling comfortable when interacting with others. I thought that was amazing to share because some people may not even have an idea. You may not, you're like boundaries, what, like you may have heard of the word because it's a buzzword in now in our culture, especially if you're on social media. But I thought her definition was so clear. Like your boundaries are expectation. What do you expect from people? And what you also need to help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. Like I'm not gonna add, I'm just going to share here. So, this is what I talked about with self care. This is what she says about self care. Self care is more than taking a spa day. Let me go on this right quick. So, I have not been on social media. I've been on social media, found out that my account was not actually deactivated like I thought because someone was like, I followed you. And I was like, you followed me. We're not going to go there today. But self care is most of our generation. I am a millennial, is on social media. And social media gives us all of these glamorous pics of self care. People are taking like baths, people are um going on walks. People are getting their fingernails done. They're getting their toenails. They're getting pedicures, manicures. They're getting facials. All those things are amazing. However, there's another level, I believe, in self care. So if that's where you are, there's no judgment, there's no shade there. I'm literally saying, okay, great. Let's take it to the next level. So it's more than just those things. And it's not selfish. She also says that saying no to helping is an act of self care. Paying attention to your needs is self care. And like putting on an oxygen mask, you'll have more energy for others if you apply it to yourself first. If you think about it, the root of self care is setting boundaries. It's saying no to something in order to say yes to your own emotional, physical, and mental well being. Like I said, I am not going to add anything. I'm literally just going to give you what she says. So, this is another thing that I wanted to share that came up as well, not came up, another thing in her book that she writes about these are signs that you may need boundaries. You feel overwhelmed, you feel resentful towards people for asking for help, you avoid phone calls and interactions with people who might ask for something, you make comments about helping people and getting nothing in return, you feel burned out, you frequently daydream about dropping everything and disappearing, you have no time for yourself. And anybody who's listened to my podcast knows me and time. Time is like, woof, the best friend in the whole wide world. Okay. So this is something else that she talks about in chapter. Let me tell y'all what chapter I'm in. Chapter 7 is called Blurred Lines Make It Plain. Boundaries are assertive steps that you take verbally and behaviorally to create a peaceful life. So this is what I read next is from chapter 7. So she says, it's true. People may not like the boundaries you set and they might retaliate by cutting you off. Did oh, okay. By cutting you off, giving you the silent treatment, manipulating you by trying to talk you out of a boundary, being mean. And then the next thing she says is setting limits won't disrupt a healthy relationship. So if you have any pushback while I'm sharing any of these things, I want you to know that setting limits in a healthy relationship will not disrupt the relationship. So the adverse goes there. So if you're setting boundaries and people are pushing back, or like they're trying to manipulate you out of the boundary, it's probably not a healthy relationship. Probably not a healthy relationship. Let's go to chapter 8. Whew. So chapter 8 is called Trauma and Boundaries. Free yourself from your past with healthy boundaries. So this chapter was very, very emotional for me. Um, Most of you who listen to my podcast, and if this may not be your first time hearing this, and I'm not going to stop talking about it because it is very important, and very soon it will make all sense. It will all connect. But this chapter, she's talking about trauma and setting boundaries, and that for people who have been through traumatic things, childhood trauma, whether it was abuse, a neglect, household dysfunction, all considered trauma. Okay, let me give you this. Childhood trauma, and this is what Nedra says, impacts our development as well as our ability to implement and honor boundaries. Trauma in childhood includes sexual, physical, and emotional abuse and neglect. Let's look at each area. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey was created to measure the impact of childhood trauma. The ACE measures trauma in the areas of abuse, neglect, and childhood dysfunction. The ACE accounts for the following areas: abuse, physical, sexual, emotional; neglect, physical, emotional; household dysfunction, mental illness, incarcerated relative; substance abuse, mother treated violently; divorce. It's also traumatic to move. It's also traumatic to move multiple times. I share that because if you've been through any of those things in your life, then this is for you. And this is why this book is important for you to read, and not only read, but digest and implement and take action on. I'm having an emotional response to this, specifically because I understand the power in, let me go to the page before I get out, the power in sharing with people. And sometimes people just don't know. They just don't know. And I was one of those people who just did not, I just didn't know. And and what I mean by I just didn't know, it's like I didn't know that I needed support. When I went to the therapist 10 years ago, I just knew that I was angry. I just knew that something had happened to me, and I'm outlashing on this guy that I'm dating, and he's telling me basically you need some help. And I'm feeling a little bit out of my mind because I'm like, I don't even want to live anymore. Like I can't interact with this person that I'm telling him that I love him. We've had some trouble in our relationship, and then at home I don't feel supported, and in other areas in my relationships they're not working out. I didn't really know what to tell the therapist at the time, but he worked with me. He was patient with me. He listened to me, and he was able to tease out of the information that I shared that, hey, beautiful, that is my alarm for 4 o'clock. So this was supposed to be a little shorter than where I am now, which is totally fine. But he was able to tease out of the information that I shared with him, like, beautiful. He didn't call me beautiful, but that's how I talk to myself. You've been through some traumatic things. And that was the first time I had heard that word, traumatic. I thought traumatic was a car accident. I thought traumatic was, maybe my parents being on drugs. I thought traumatic was, being kidnapped. I had no idea that what I had experienced was traumatic. And then I'm like, okay, you're saying traumatic, and he's breaking it down. And so when he's breaking it down, I'm having this emotional response in his office, like, oh my goodness, like, what? Like, this is what I've been living through. Like, and out of all the spaces I could have come to a therapist or sought some help, I didn't know I needed help. And so sometimes you don't know that you need help. You don't realize that the experience that you've had was traumatic and it changed the way that you function. It changed your brain. It changes how you show up. That is why my podcast is here. The journey back to you. Because most women, which my audience is, have been through traumatic experiences. And it just breaks my heart that some of us just don't know where to go and know where to turn to get some help. So I say it again, if you are one of those women and you've been through something, you can be one of the five that I give this book or this audible version to you. Because beautiful, I'm telling you, it will put you on this journey. It's going to be emotional, I know, because I've been through it myself and read this book, and I've been through a lot of therapy, and I've done a lot of inner work. And even reading it now and even sharing it here, I'm still having an emotional response to it because it's so much that you just don't know that you don't know. And that's okay, because no longer will be the day that you're like, I didn't know. You can look in this book and then you will, and then you can seek out the help that you need to support you on the journey back to yourself. Okay. So here it is. I am reading from chapter 8, Trauma and Boundaries. Common issues experienced by adults who've experienced abuse or neglect. They want to help everyone, even without the means to do so. They're working nonstop, equating to busyness in success, loaning people money who have proved they won't pay it back, oversharing in hopes of receiving love, being unable to regulate emotions, being a people pleaser, fearing conflict, having low self esteem, being in enmeshed relationships, meaning that you are the person that you're with, don't know where you end and they begin, being unable to make decisions without input from others. And that was me. Like all of those things that I've listed, every single one I've been through. Every single one, I'll be honest, been there, done that, got the t-shirt to prove it. Like, and I want for those of you who are listening to just listen to my heart as I'm sharing this stuff. Yes, this is a book. Yes, this is a resource. However, there are specific people that I know who in my life now are having even better experiences in relationships, having even better experiences with themselves because they've read this book. And I don't have the liberty to share who those people are, but I will say, like, we've read this book together, we've navigated things together, we've talked about this. And sometimes you just need a person to give you some information that will push you to the next space in your life, that will open you up to realize, like, I can be more fulfilled in my life. I can be more of myself even in this space. And what I will say here is that even in the space that you're in right now, beautiful, you are worthy of love. You are worthy of compassion. You are worthy of all your heart's desires, even with the information that you have now. So this is not to say you're not worthy because you don't know this stuff. This is not to say you're not worthy because you don't have boundaries. I am saying just because you simply exist, you are worthy, okay, of love. Oh my goodness, my mouth is getting dry. Here we go. Okay. So my next thing that I want to share is from the same chapter. And here we are. So this is still chapter 8, and this is two things that I highlighted here. If you are in a relationship with someone who has attachment issues, instead of accepting who they are, or instead of it just accepting what you see, challenge it. Name what you're observing. It might be even okay to share your hypothesis of the other person's behavior. If you don't speak up, the relationship will remain unhealthy unless and until the underlying issues are addressed. If you're in a relationship with someone who has experienced trauma, if you're in a relationship with someone who has experienced trauma, which most of us have, don't try to do the work for them by enabling them. Tell them what you see and refer them to a mental health professional. These are not my words, these are Nedra's. This next chapter is chapter 9. What are you doing to honor your boundaries? So it's not just knowing what boundaries are, setting up boundaries, and then you're done. You have to honor them. You have to honor them, meaning that I'll read you what she says about this. Okay. Um, Basically, remember, people can ask you for anything, but it's up to you to maintain your boundaries by saying no or setting limits as to how much and how little you can help them. I wanted to say something else. Well, we'll go back. I'll go back. So, this is what I have to share from this chapter. You can't change people, but you can change. You can't change people, but you, beautiful, you can change. A little bit of my story I'll share here is that when 10 years ago, when this guy told me I needed to go to therapy, I um I felt really low. I felt really low. And I didn't understand at the time. And like I said, I was very immature at this age. I didn't understand that what he was saying is that, in so many words, what you need help with, I cannot help you. The things I've done, the way that I am towards you is because I love you. But even my love is not enough to get you to where you need to be. And now that I think about that, I'm like, best thing out of all the things that, and not to focus on that relationship, but out of all the things that were in that relationship, the one of the best things that could have happened is him introducing me to therapy. And he didn't really introduce me. He told me with his mouth, but I had to take action and actually go see someone. So if you are with someone, get the person some support. You don't be that. You cannot support people through some of the things that are happening in their mind. In the way, let the professionals do what they do best. You can't change people, but you can change how you deal with them, what you accept, how you react to them, how often you interact with them, how much space you allow them to take up, what you participate in, what role they play in your life, and what people have contact with, and who you allow into your life, and your perspective, right? Can't change people, but you can change, is what she says there. Okay, so I think I only have one more. So what I want to say is before I go into the last thing that I want to share, this book covers so many areas, y'all. It covers, like, when I'm talking about boundaries, I'm not just talking about personal boundaries with just your mental health. I'm not talking about just some of the things I've shared. She has she teaches and she shares how to do boundaries in so many areas. She has the area of family, romantic relationships, friendships, work, and social media and tech. So I'm going to go to the social media and tech because that is the age that we're in right now. And I think most of what I share can be a little bit heavy. And even though I intentionally am doing that, I still want to share with you, like, you may have amazing boundaries with the people in your life. You may have amazing boundaries with your family, in your relationship, at your job. But some of us, and I say us, which is why y'all don't see me on social media. Some of us don't have amazing boundaries with technology. And because we are in such a social media technology age right now, especially as millennials, I want to share this with you. Social media, this is what Nedra says, social media and technology. This is chapter 14. Self discipline is the act of creating boundaries for yourself. So, let's see. So, for me, one of the things that pushed me to get off of social media is that I was on there one day, and I there was an announcement of something that was happening with a celebrity, and it was all over the internet. And this particular day was a great day for me. And seeing this information on the internet about someone I don't know, but I could feel it so deeply in my heart, I was like, I don't want to always be bombarded or ambushed, is the word. I don't want to be ambushed with this type of information because I am a deep filler. I was like, this is crazy. Like, and so I went down this whole like asking myself questions about why did I feel ambushed? Like I felt betrayed in some way because my friends that are close to me, my like people who are in my life, they know I have that boundary because I'm such a deep filler. You cannot just send me that somebody, even my family, I had to like restate my boundary and re-emphasize like if somebody passes away or something really bad happens, I am not the first person that you need to tell. Like you give me some time. And what I mean by this is, okay, somebody passes away today. Yes, I want to know, but delay it a little bit and soften it up for me. Death is hard already. And so for me as a deep feeling, this is a personal preference. This is my opinion. Nobody else has to ascribe to this. This is for me. This is a boundary that I have set for my mental health, for my emotional health, is that I do want to know. I do feel compassion. I do feel love. I do feel sadness. I feel the grief, all of those things. But I don't need you to just text it to me. I don't need you to send me the obituary. I don't want you to just put it in my face or just like, hey girl, how you doing? Just trying to see how you doing. Such. No, 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 no. That's not how it happens for me. People in my life who love me and see me and know this boundary will just let me know, hey, Sierra, I got some information I need to share with you. It's not so good. Okay, I can prepare my heart now. Such and such has passed away. Do you remember such and such? Like softly, gently, like leading me into the, because that's gonna hit anybody. I would think that has emotions and feels human. It's gonna affect you in some kind of way. So just boom and just blabbing it out does not work for me. It does not work for me. It does not work for me. And so when I saw this, I had to recognize you don't have a boundary with social media. Maybe if you weren't on it as long as you were today, you might have not seen that. Or all of these other things that came up. So I share that with you to say this. That was one of the reasons that was one of the leading up things that kind of was like, okay, because I already knew at the top of the year I needed to be off of social media, and I had spoke with a coach and I was talking to her about it. And she was like, why do you feel like you need to do that? And I think I procrastinated on even answering in my journal about it. But I was like, I can do it. I can be out here until this happens and reminds me of like, you know what you said, Sierra. You knew what you needed, but you questioned what you needed. And I would not have saw that if I was off the internet, off of Instagram specifically. I wouldn't have saw that. But because I was interacting, I saw that took me back, that took me back to myself to remind me, like, you need to sit with this. Why do you feel I can't be mad at I can't be mad at the internet. I can't be out here like the internet then ambushed me. The internet has betrayed me. It's like you betrayed yourself, Sierra. Like you knew what you needed. And so that I had to take some inventory. So here are some signs that you might need boundaries with your digital usage. You find yourself constantly checking your phone when you're supposed to focus on something else. You spend excessive amounts of time on your phone. The average person spends about 3 hours a day on their phone. Let it sit where it sits. In social settings, you're glued to your phone instead of socializing. That drives me crazy. Just the FYI. If we're going to be communicating, and I don't have control over other people. I have control over Sierra. I can't tell you, like, it drives me crazy. You regularly use your phone as an escape from working, parenting, completing tasks, or being present with others. To me, those two kind of go together. People have complained about your digital usage. You use your phone while driving. Your technology usage impacts your ability to function in other areas, such as in school, at work, or at home. Your technology usage hurts your mental or emotional health. Whew. So that is some like this is so good, this book is, right? Like, so if you're getting bits and pieces of what I'm sharing, I'm not even going through all of the chapters and you're like, oh my goodness, I need some help with even identifying if I need boundaries in this area. You want this book because she breaks it down. And like I said, I'll go over those areas with you one more time. Romantic relationships, friendships, work, social media, and technology. Those are the areas that she goes over, and she helps you to identify some signs that you might need it. And then she tells you and shares with you how to do the work in that area. So the very last thing that I want to share here is, this one is really good. So this one is about things that may need to happen before you leave an unhealthy relationship. So I wish I had this book a decade ago. Not even a decade, because it wasn't a decade. There was a day when this guy introduced me to therapy. Um, it would be years later when me and him are exiting a very unhealthy relationship. And I decided to leave, and I could not identify that this was unhealthy at first, but once I read in my journal that some of the things that were occurring in our relationship were reoccurring even after he's expressed that this wouldn't happen again, I was like, oh, like I could not deny my own things that I had written, but I could deny things that he would speak to me and say, Sierra, well, this is not, I didn't mean to do that. And I'm looking at my journal and it's like, no, you may have not meant to do this, but this has happened for the fifth time. And so for me, I was able to identify by my own words I had written and read over and over again, like, oh, this is time number 4, this is time number 5. But because it was so unhealthy, I would get in this cycle and I didn't realize that I was in like a spinning room. And so that was a whole thing. I was in like a spinning room. And so once the room stopped spinning, at first I would identify and be like, oh my goodness, I did remember that picture being on the wall. I do remember those flowers being over there. And that's an analogy. That is an analogy for, I do remember you saying that. I do remember you putting your hands on me before. I do remember you telling me that you love me and that you would stop doing this and that you're still doing it. I do remember you cheating. I do remember finding those papers in your car and the letters that you had written. I do remember finding those text messages and you and this person is supposed to disconnect it and y'all are still connected. Like so many things were happening, but I was in this spinning room that when this person would express to me things that were not happening, that were actually happening, it just like even listening to me speak that, it's frustrating to hear. But these are things that may need to happen before you leave an unhealthy relationship. This is what Nedra says. You may need to give up trying to think of ways to fix something that can't be fixed. You may need to get rid of talking to your friends about the same problems. You may need to get tired of having values that aren't being honored. You may need to, that you aren't honoring, is how she said it. You may need to ask for what you want, see it happen temporarily, and notice that the changes are short lived. You may need to figure out how to excuse me. You may need to figure out how to exist without this person in your life. You may need to realize that the bad outweighs the good. You may need to be honest with yourself about how the relationship is impacting your wellness. Ooh, that was good. And I haven't shared any of the exercises or even talked about this, but I will say this. She has exercises at the end. So it is, I'm telling you, if you don't have this book, you need it in your life. You need it in your life. Even if you're just like, I don't have boundaries at work, grab the book, grab the book. So this is the exercise that she says to do for this. Grab your journal or a separate sheet of paper and complete the following exercise. Describe your idea of a healthy relationship. So this is specifically in the area. This is chapter, let me tell you, this is chapter 12, I believe. Hold on, give me a second, make sure. This is chapter 12. This chapter is labeled friendship. And she says that friendships, your boundaries are a reflection of how willing you are to advocate for the life you want. And you know, we all over here on the Journey Back to You podcast, we are creating a life that serves us first, right? And so let's go back to what she says. So she's saying that to grab your journal and a separate sheet of paper and complete the following exercise. Describe your idea of a healthy friendship. Identify with whom you have healthy friendships. List your unhealthy friendships and define what makes them unhealthy. Determine what needs to be said or done to improve the friendship. And I am a journaler. I am a journaler. So I absolutely love that these activities are here. I absolutely love that she gives them at the end. I want to say at the end of every chapter that yes, there's another exercise. So yeah, like I love this book, y'all. And there's even a self-assessment. There's a self-assessment at the end, so you can see where you are with boundaries. There's also a what do you call this? Commonly asked questions at the end, and she even has like a glossary or index, if you will, to kind of go back to see maybe you just want to specifically read about something. Let's just say you want to look up work boundaries. So you look up the letter W and you see work and it says 219 to 232. See also relationships about overview of boundaries, challenges, page 23. So I love it. I'm telling you, this is my book without the cover, but this is it. It is Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. I'm telling you, Nedra or Nedra? I think it's Nedra. I probably should have looked that up. But I will say this once again, connect with me. I asked two things at the beginning of this video or this audio if you're listening. Connect with me if you're reading a book because it's just summertime. So I want to know what you're reading. Suggest to me some books, especially if the author is narrating their book on Audible. I want to read it. And the second thing I asked is if you know or you feel or you're just like some of the things I shared resonated with you, or you're like, oh my goodness, I need this book, but it's not in my budget right now, or I don't have the money for it. I want you to send me a message on my website, which will be in a link in the show notes. And you can reach out and I will get you the book, or I will send you the audible version of this book. I'm telling you, you need it in your life. It is a guide to reclaiming yourself, an amazing guide. It has journaling exercises. I'm even willing that if, five people reach out, I'm even willing that if you feel safe, we can read it together. We can navigate this stuff together. We'll get all of those details kind of ironed out. But thank you so much for listening. I hope that this book resonated with you in some way, or you're like, oh, I just need to brush up on my boundaries or over here. Or if you're just the boundaries queen, if you are the boundaries queen, come on, let's do it. That's amazing. For listening, thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait to share another book with you for the segment of the book chat.